we've been doing these species of the month for how long have we been in existence? 6, 7 years. And in all that time, we've done species of the month just about every month for all these years. And in all that time, I've done one sulphur. And there's a reason for that. They're tough. The adults are hard to identify, and the adults are pretty difficult to identify, and because of that, I've kind of shied away from them. But this is I'll be doing the species tonight on the Queen Alexandra sulphur. This is actually one of the more difficult ones. We have 7 species of coleus or sulphurs in Washington, and 3 of them are easy to identify, but they're very rare, so you're not going to see them anyway. But the more difficult ones are a group that includes the western sulphur, the Queen Alexandra sulphur, and the pink-edged sulphur, and they're all pretty hard to tell apart. And so this is right in that group. But we'll take a look at it, and forgive me if I sound incoherent at times because they are hard. Use on the computer. First of all, sulphurs all pretty much look alike. They tend to have either bright yellow or greenish yellow underwings, and they're usually yellow on the dorsal surface. The males tend to have on the dorsal side, the upper side, males have these big black bands across the tips of their wings, while the females usually have more broken bands, and that's one way to tell the sexes apart. The eggs of all the sulphurs are typical Pierid eggs, Pierids being the family to which all of the sulphurs and the whites belong. And there are these spindle-shaped eggs that are long and slender and attached at one end, so they stick up from the plat that they're laid on. This is real typical. And here's a little first instar sulphur larva, typical blackhead. One thing interesting about sulphur larvae is these little hairs or sepia that stick up, and this is just a little bit blurry so it's hard to see, but each one of them ends with a little cross at the top, a little cap. You can see maybe on some of these, let's see, again, they're just not quite clear enough, but each of these little sepia that stick out have this little cross top. And that feature stays with the larvae pretty much throughout development, although proportionately the sepia or hairs get smaller and smaller. So you can see every one of these, you can see it kind of ends with a kind of a fat top. That's actually a little cross at the top. That's second instar larva. And they pretty much retain the same general color and shape. They're green larvae. Pretty much in all of the sulphurs we have green larvae with some kind of a side stripe. And as they get older, then that side stripe becomes usually pretty clear white, as it is here. This is the 4th instar. The sulphurs have 5 instars. And by the way, the females lay their eggs in the summer, and the eggs hatch, and the larvae grow up to usually about 2nd instar, which is pretty small. And those little 2nd instars overwinter through the winter. And so they're kind of difficult butterflies to rear because you have to take care of those little larvae through the whole winter. You have to keep them in refrigerated conditions, but you can't let them get too wet because they'll mold. You can't let them get too dry because they'll desiccate. And so you tend to lose quite a few of them. But if you can get them through the winter, the next summer, then you start feeding them their host plant. Most of the sulphurs feed on some kind of legumes. That's like clovers and vetches and associated types of plants. Although we do have 2 species that actually feed on huckleberries. Here's the final instar. And the final instars of sulphurs, again, they'll have this very attractive white band. And if you look carefully, you can see red spots in it, one there, one there, one there. This is very subdued, but in some of our sulphurs, when they get to this final instar stage, they have these bright red spots all along this band that they're quite attractive. That's 30 millimeters, that's a little over 1 inch long, and that's about as big as they get. And here's what the larvae look like. And pretty much all of the sulphurs have this, not larvae, but pupae. That's what the pupa looks like. And it's mounted upright on a stem. This happens to be on the host plant that it was reared on. This is actually a type of lotus, not even a native lotus, but this is what I reared this one on. And they attach at one end, and then they tie a girdle thread at the upper end to keep them from falling over. And in this species, at least, they hatch after about a week. And here again is the sulphur, the adult. This is a freshly eclosed or emerged adult, which was reared. First thing you might say is, well, that's a pink edge sulphur, because look at all the pink edges. Actually, all of the sulphurs, when they're fresh, have pink edges, and so, or most of them do. So that's a problem with identification. But the things you look for in Alexandra, Queen Alexandra sulphur, is you look at this white spot here, and it does not have a little satellite spot next to it. A lot of sulphurs do. They have a second little spot. And up here on the leading edge of the wing, one of the sulphurs that look very similar to this is the western sulphur. It'll have a little brown nick or a little mark right on the leading edge of the wing there. That's a way to tell them apart. Also, the Queen Alexandra tends to have, see these little dark scales that look like specks all over the wing? They tend to be relatively uniform and to kind of come out to the edge of the wing. Whereas in the western sulphur, it tends to have the spots more concentrated in the inner part with usually a more plain yellow outer part. So these are kind of subtle differences. And so that's why I say these sulphurs can be kind of difficult to identify. Now here is another type of Queen Alexandra sulphur. The ones we have in northern Washington are like the one we just saw with those nice heavily bordered spots on the hind wing. This one's off the internet, by the way, from the Butterflies of America webpage. And you notice the spot has no ring around it at all. And that's kind of the more traditional appearance of the Queen Alexandra sulphur. But ours up here in northern Washington look like this. They have a bold ring around that spot. And so here we have not only a sulphur that's in a group that's hard to identify, but it's also quite variable. So not only does it look like the other species, but it also so variable it tends to overlap the other species, makes it even more fun. And here's a pin specimen again from Butterflies of America webpage. Again, you notice that there's no ring around the little white spot. When you see that, it's Queen Alexandra sulphur, but if you don't see it and you're in northern Washington, it still might be. Now here's a western sulphur, and you remember that I just mentioned Queen Alexandras didn't have a satellite spot. That's a satellite spot right there. That's what I was talking about. And also I said it didn't have a little brown nick or point at the leading edge of the hind wing. There's what I'm talking about, that little dark spot right there. So those are two things you look for to separate the western sulphur from the Queen Alexandras. Here's another western sulphur, this picture from the web. And again, notice the heavy brown satellite spot and the heavy mark on the leading edge of the wing. And that might be, yeah, that's it. And so that's the Queen Alexandra sulphur with comparison to the western. Any questions?
What is the range in Washington?
Queen Alexandra sulphur is found in eastern Washington, pretty much throughout the state where it's not in the real dry Columbia Basin. But as you get to the southern part of its range, then you tend to get the form that does not have the dark ring around the white spot. It tends to be just a plain white spot. You get up into Okanagan County, up in that area, you get the kind that have the ring. They're actually different subspecies, but they're still considered the same species. And by the way, the ones that have the ring tend to be larger. Yeah, these guys tend to be larger. It's different subspecies, and they tend to be quite a bit larger than the southern forms that don't have the ring.
Just another question. Is the pinkness of the antenna and on the legs something that kind of goes away a little bit as it
Yeah,
gets more mature?
The pinkness, especially on the edges of the wings and like you say on the antennae, it does fade with age. And I think with the pink edge sulphur, which is very similar to this, I think with the pink edge sulphur, it does tend to stay a little longer, and that's why they call one pink edge. But this is very pink edge too, so that's kind of a misnomer. Yes, Steve.
Would you find Alexandra and Western sulphurs in similar habitats, or are there differences in habitat that they would use that would aid in identification?
That's a good question. Do Westerns and Queen Alexandras occur together? I haven't seen them right together, but I think they do. Like this one was from a population up at Moses Meadows. It's north of Moses Meadows away. I think right in Moses Meadows proper, I think you will find Western sulphurs. And this was in a forested habitat 6 or 7 miles further north. So it's a little different habitat. This one's a bit more forested, but yeah, they'll occur at least close together, certainly in the same general area. Makes it all that more fun, doesn't it? Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.